Mark, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. How many are here from a church? Excellent. How many of you want to go to a church? How many of you need to go to church? Thank you. My name is Craig Harper. As Mark said, I live in Frisco, Texas, which is north of Dallas, Fort Worth, Dallas proper. And for 4 years now, I've been the general manager of Sony Faith. I'm very proud of that fact, and I'll talk a little bit about what we do and how we do it. The previous 25 years from that, I was with a company in Dallas, my name was BLO. I was Chief Technology Officer, and I was responsible for KING, Kong, and Northwest Cable News. Here, I had 20 TV stations, had 6 newspapers. My major newspaper is the Dallas Morning News. I had 6 cable channels. That's hard to say, cable channels. 1996, we built the Food Network in New York City. We sold our company, and because of my work at my church, which is a little church in North Dallas by the name of Prestonwood, I've been there about 27 years. I'm a deacon. I serve on the board of directors of our international television and radio ministry by the name of PowerPoint. Before you say anything, we own the name PowerPoint, and there's an agreement for Microsoft to use it. So don't, oh my goodness, there's PowerPoint. I'm sure your church doesn't have a ministry named Excel or Word, but we share the name PowerPoint with them. And so I'm very much involved in media for churches, and that's why Sony created this position, because when we sold BLO 4.5 years ago, they actually came to me and said, look, we would like to get deeper into the church business. We have several churches, very large churches, but we know there's more to it than that. So let me go a little bit of a history. So in the beginning, this is our version of Genesis. There we go. The company began in 1946 in Japan. The first thing that our company built was an electric rice cooker. Now that's very Japanese, but we did not do well with that. So the ownership of the company decided, well, let's do something else. And they were actually very interested in electronics. So the chairman of the company back then, when there were 3 guys, created the very first reel-to-reel machine, which was called portable. And that's a picture of it. It's a portable reel-to-reel recorder, weighed 58 pounds. But at the time, it was revolutionary. They changed their name. It was a different name, but they changed their name to Sonus, or to Sony, which meant sound. So in the faith business, I'm very lucky. I work in a very large company. There's 125,000 employees at Sony. And my part is on the electronics or the equipment side, but there's other parts of our faith business. We own a music library. We're the second largest music company in the world. Universal is number 1, Sony BMG is number 2. And we own everything from the Columbia Records library, which is about 110 years old, to there's a dozen or more labels, but most of our labels are contemporary music. But we do own Provident and RCA Inspiration, which are gospel albums, our gospel labels. There's a gentleman, if you don't know this name, you can Google it later. His name is Clive Davis. And Clive is the chairman of Sony Music. And I've ridden in the elevator with him in New York before, and he's always got boom, boom, boom. He's got music going. The next thing is Sony Pictures Entertainment. A lot of people don't realize how big and wide and depth we have in the content creation business, but we own Columbia Pictures. Sony Pictures is the main TriStar, Screen Gems, Sony Animation, Sony Pictures Classic, Affirm Films, Crackle, and then we have a TV channel called Get TV. We also own the Game Show Network. We also own Crackle and some other things. Well, Affirm Films is really cool, and I'm very proud of that part, and I'll talk about that in a second. The other thing that is my area is the Media Solutions Division. Some of the TV shows we own, which is also sometimes a surprise, but if you watch the end of the TV shows, it'll go Sony, it'll go bing, and it'll say bum, 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 Sony Pictures Television. So these are just a few of the TV shows that we own. Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee is on Crackle with Jerry Seinfeld. Amazing show for over the top, and we're going to talk about what over the top is. If you've never used that or heard that term before, about 7 million people watch episodes of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. And it's just a proof of where this whole media business is moving. Oh yeah, so we also have a consumer company. We make a little TV called a Bravia TV, We own home projectors, audio systems, and of course, we own the #1 product that we build called PlayStation. At Sony Faith, I call it Praise Station, but the Japanese don't understand when I say that. They don't know what. So anyway, Affirm Films. So let's talk about Affirm for a second. In fact, I just 20 minutes before I walked in here, I was emailing with a gentleman by the name of Rich Pluso, who's the studio executive of Affirm. He runs this studio for us. And he and I are going to see each other next week at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. So Affirm, you never heard of, but it's always pretty cool to mention. We did movies last year: War Room, Risen, Miracles from Heaven, The Star. How many saw The Star at Christmas? It was a Sony Pictures animation. It is a killer cartoon. Birth of Jesus. If you don't have it, it's available, I think, now on Blu-ray, which, by the way, is a Sony product. We invented that. And available for download. But The Star is an incredible animated feature of the birth of Jesus. And I will tell you that one thing that's very interesting is that in my world, Jesus is never mentioned as a curse word. We have prayer. And we have a film studio that makes movies that are not about God, but mention Jesus. And War Room, by the way, had a huge number of salvations recorded of people that didn't even know what the movie was. Go into the theater, oh, wow, I remember a war movie one time. I'll go watch that. And so anyway, they got to see a great film. So our advertising with Sony Faith is options. Finally, there are options. And the options are everything in the world from Sony. And if you look at my website, sony.com/faith, I tell people that we have the Cheesecake Factory menu of equipment. Turn the first page. Oh my goodness, those ribs look good. Oh, that steak looks good. Oh, the fish. I mean, we have so many things. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is. Our mission, which I'll get very quickly through it, is to serve Christian churches and ministries with the finest technology at the right price, assisting with fulfilling the Great Commission digitally. And we provide expertise, which is very different than a lot of other folks that are in this space. They're just selling boxes. You know, that's where we're a little bit different. And we're the only manufacturer, as I mentioned already before, with this. And I'm going to try really hard not to make this only a Sony commercial. It's more of an education. But unfortunately, I only know one brand and one product. Now, there are other companies here that ABS has invited. They make 4K cameras. They make switchers. And even maybe they make a 4K switcher. And they make projectors. We invented the laser projector, by the way, and it's outstanding. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Corporate has told me I can't discuss their equipment, so I'll go ahead and discuss ours. So long before any of you were born, even before Mark and I were born, television was live, and it was black and white, and standard definition was not 480 lines or NTSC. It was much lower resolution. But on the CBS television network on Thursday, October the 11th of 1956, there was a TV show called Requiem of a Heavyweight. It was on a TV series called Playhouse 90. It won 5 Emmy Awards. Same week, the next week, I Love Lucy on the same network, the same at the time about 100 TV stations aired on the 15th of October, an episode with Orson Welles of I Love Lucy. The coolest thing about that is that CBS was the #1 network because there was only NBC and CBS at the time, and these were big programs. A lot of people saw them. So let's talk a little bit about that. I Love Lucy today, somewhere in the world, has already probably aired 10 times. It airs on local stations. It airs on cable networks. It's airing around the world. It's been translated into almost every language. This is Lucy Meets Orson Welles, and it was on the Hallmark Channel just recently, that exact episode from 1956. So Playhouse 90 was created live at the CBS Grand Central Terminal Studios in New York City before they moved to where they are today. It was produced live twice at 8 p.m. Eastern and 11 p.m. Eastern for the West Coast. There were 9 cameras involved. RCA TK11s was the model of camera. And it was recorded on kinescope, which is a film camera that actually recorded a TV screen. It was very, very bad. But it's never been seen again because it doesn't look good. It doesn't reproduce. If you'll go back to the slide, just saying I need to advance this. I Love Lucy, shot on film at Desilu Studios in Hollywood months before it aired, in the summer before it aired in October. 3 cameras shooting 35 millimeter film. There were Mitchell film cameras. And 35 millimeter film, even today, is equal to high definition resolution. And like I said, that show has been seen for over 60 years. Now, what's the important thing about that? It was shot in a very high resolution for 1956 on film, and so it has an archive. It wasn't done live. There's a great story about why I Love Lucy was the first syndicated TV show, is because Desi Arnaz, Lucy's real life husband, made a deal with CBS. I'll pay for the film to shoot it because we don't want to do it live. We don't want to live in New York City. And they said, sure, whatever, we'll let you have the show. Well, that show has been making money ever since. The point is you shoot on the highest resolution, you protect the negative, and you have something for the future. Now, for us, we're dealing today in 4K or UHD. Those are 2 different things, but they're very much the same in a lot of ways. In theaters, we invented a little projector, which is about the size of a refrigerator laying on its side, but we introduced the first 4K theatrical projector. And if you've ever seen a 3D movie, you've seen it on a Sony SXRD projector like this. So in 2006, we invented the first digital 4K projector for theaters. We have really, it's about 38% now of all the theaters in America have a Sony projector in it. And more they're converting because film is no longer really cost effective to shoot on and to ship around the country to every theater. It breaks, it gets scratches, etc. So resolution for 4K, for the theatrical side, which is really 4K, this is the main gate at Sony Pictures in Culver City, California, which was the original MGM studios built in 1907. So this is 4K. It's 4096 by 2160. So you know 1080, you know all those numbers. Well, these are the new numbers. That's for theatrical. And that's the ratio is a 1.9 to 1 ratio. Now for 4K in the home, which we build a 4K projector, and of course we build TV sets, and other people do too. 4K is a little bit different. It's a lower resolution because it's called what we really have to call is ultra high definition. And I'll show you the reason why it's ultra HD, but it's been, the slang name for it is 4K. So it's really just 4 1080 pictures divided up. It's 16 by 9. That's, for obvious reasons, was to keep that format and that ratio and that aspect ratio going. So that's exactly what UHD is 4 1080 images together. Now, whenever we're dealing, and that's the resolution of ultra high definition, 2160 by 3840. So if you notice on this TV, the theatrical 4K is just a little bit wider. So everything that's shot today, motion pictures, anything that's shot theatrical 4K, they're shooting to protect the edges for UHD. Because really the distribution on TV or on Netflix or over the top, things like that is far more valuable these days. So when you're working in 4K today, which is happening a lot, we're talking about the resolution, we're talking about 4K SDR, standard definition, or standard dynamic range, 4K HDR, high dynamic range. Anybody ever heard of high dynamic range? If you own an iPhone 3, by the way, we build all the cameras for your cell phones. You all have a Sony camera with it. Thank you very much. My 401k really likes that. We created a set of cameras for Apple to do HDR many years ago. In fact, today I think on an iPhone you can just tell it to record HDR or not. It would take 2 pictures. One was the iris was wide open, and the second was the iris was down, and it would blend the 2 pictures. By the way, my Sony Xperia 4K cell phone, it has HDR and has for a long time and has a beautiful picture. I'll be glad to show you that. They're available at Best Buy right down the street. Once again, my 401k, thanks. So here are the advantages of 4K. Even though 4K really isn't required today, it's not transmitted over the air. You have to have an Apple box, which their Apple TV box is only about 4 months old. But the new ATSC 3.0 transmission standard for television will handle 4K, kinda. And if you don't, I'm telling you not to, but if you Google me, you'll also see that I was the former chairman of the National Association of Broadcasters TV Technology Committee. And one of the things we worked on was the new transmission standard. And just so you'll know, we fought the White House and the Obama administration for 3.5 years to not kill the wireless microphone spectrum and to not sell the television channel spectrum. So what you're going through with your wireless mics, which by the way, we make wireless mics, was we tried to stop that, but there was other very, very powerful forces behind that. So anyway, preserve the archive value of the content. When you shoot in 4K today and you transmit in high definition or use it at 720 or whatever your resolution is, at least you have an archive copy of it in the highest resolution. Think back to Lucille Ball and Novel of Lucy. In a year, 5 years, 10 years from now, you would have a copy of a groundbreaking of a building or a sermon series or whatever it may be in 4K so that later you can go back and use it, modify it, and it'll always look very, very good, whatever the new standard is. And I just don't believe 8K will be a transmission standard, especially anytime in the near future when 4K is already struggling to try to get out of the gate for that. You're creating a much higher quality HD signal. When you watch a 4K image that's been transcoded into HD, the picture is spectacular because you're starting with such high resolution and so many more bits that even though it's compressed, it's gorgeous. If you have a Sony 4K TV and you're just watching 1080 programming on it, it's really very pretty. It's much better because the way the display works and we upconvert it in a very elegant manner. Once again, you're really recording the greatest latitude with the color bit range, everything about it is much, much better. High dynamic range, you have 14 stops of dynamic range. If you're used to cameras like an A7S, which is our DSLR, or an FS7, or one of our cameras, you know about stops, that's the iris. Well, in HD, you don't have 14 stops of dynamic range. In 4K, you do. Then lastly, you have the flexibility for reframing and image correction. So whenever you shoot 4K, you can shoot raw, which is just everything, light to dark. It shoots everything in the picture. But it gives you the ability to move the picture around. You can do a little pan and scan or zoom in or reposition the image. My church in Dallas does that a lot. They shoot with their Sony 4K cameras in the field for our pastor, Jack Graham. But they'll shoot something, shoot a little bit wider than they need. They'll go back in later and move it if they move him to the right side of the screen or a little bit to the left or do a slow push in or out. That's exactly what you can do with it. CBS News uses our 4K cameras now for their news. And if you watch 60 Minutes, in fact, last weekend on 60 Minutes, they did an interview with a very great Texan and a Dallasite, the Secretary of State. Beautiful, soft depth of field, great, beautiful cinema. Well, it's shot on the F55 camera. Well, it's transmitted in 1080, but they shot it in this giant image that later on, when they're editing, they moved him around a little bit. They could zoom in, they could make moves on it. So it really gives you a lot of free production quality and value to it. And today, you can do a lot of things. There are cards for your computers for 4K. You can do expansion for a Mac and be able to grade the little red circle dots there. That's part of a grading system for coloring. Gives you a lot of capabilities. There's a lot of PCs now that have 4K output. This is the camera. This is the F55, which is our workhorse camera. The F55 shoots a lot of TV shows and movies and is what CBS is now using to shoot news on. A lot of the scripted shows, not just Sony-owned shows, are shot in 4K because they figured this out about 5 years ago that this preserves their future to be able to show Big Bang Theory, which is not a Sony show. It's a Warner Brothers show, but it's shot on 4K with Sony cameras. So in the future, the first 3 seasons won't be in 4K, but as it goes into reruns for the rest of our life, it'll have a 4K history. A little TV show we own on NBC called The Blacklist. Has anybody ever seen The Blacklist with James Spader? Spectacular show. Well, it's shot on two F-55s and an FS-7, which is the disposable camera. When they roll over a car or blow something up, sometimes the FS-7 is attached to the bumper of that car that flips over, and it's a relatively inexpensive camera, so they do that. But these are some shots of Blacklist being shot in New York City. It's really interesting how this works. It's shot in New York. It's written, graded, which means colorized, and edited at Sony Pictures Studios in Los Angeles. So all the way across the country, this show exists. It's shot in New York every day, raw, in 4K on an F-55 on an ASX card. It's very fast cards on the camera. And it's also recording on an R5, our 4K high-speed recorder. It's a solid-state recorder on the back of the camera. They also are shooting on another card in the camera, the HD proxy of the same show. They use our cloud service called CI, and they upload the HD. The writers and people are sitting at home watching Jeopardy, well, that's a Sony show, so of course they're watching Jeopardy. They get an email that says that the show's available. They can look it on their PC and says, man, that's right. Or no, that scene should not look like that. They need to reshoot it or whatever. But they're able to watch it using the cloud. Then that night, the cards are put on an airplane in their Pelican cases that are orange, and they're on two different airplanes that leave LaGuardia and arrive at LAX on two different flights, and Netflix makes that overnight trip every night. Then whenever it arrives, they check the files, they begin editing and grading it, and they produce two versions of the show. The NBC version gets a 1080i version of the show. The Netflix gets a 4K version because it's available on Netflix as well. So this is an application for churches. A lot of people, several churches will shoot in the field, like if their pastor is visiting Israel or is doing something. They'll shoot something and then use the cloud C, which you can get a free, I think it's it may be 5 terabytes. I don't remember how big we get it free. They'll upload the clips because it's actually not Dropbox. It's built for production. And they email the clip back to their church for them to use on Sunday morning. The pastors say, hey, folks, we're having a great tour of the steps of Paul, and we're doing this and this, and they can do that, and they use it for free. It was just uploading at the hotel there in Israel or wherever they may be. So let's talk a little bit about 4K digital cinema photography. So in the year, what year was that? 99. We and George Lucas invented a camera for him to shoot Star Wars on. It was a video camera shooting not in HD. It was about 1,000 lines of resolution, I believe. But he shot whatever the next Star Wars was using a camera that we helped him invent. And that's our history. So all the way through right now, we have a camera called Finis. And I actually have churches that have the F-55 that they use every day to produce content. It's very effective for them to use. Cost effective may or may not be the case, but they do use it. This is our big camera. This is a 8K camera. I mentioned earlier that 8K is not available. Well, it is, really. We built multiple 8K cameras. This is one on the F-65. And one of our large competitors in this space that shoots motion pictures with their cameras, they make fun of the fact that we shoot with an 8K camera making a 4K image. Well, the reason for that is when you're shooting a movie and you're on literally a silver screen, the button on someone's shirt is about 4 feet tall, possibly. Well, with our camera, you see the button and you see the fibers of the strings or the way that it's sewn onto the shirt. On their camera, you just see that it's little pieces of thread. You see the fibers with us. So we're really about the high resolution. The thing about this camera is, this is a really good friend of mine. He just retired from our company, Toshio Nishi. He was executive vice president of our company, and he actually is the one who ordained Sony Faith to begin. But this camera won an Oscar last year. So for the Academy Awards, they tell you, you watch it on TV, all the people that win it. Well, this camera, the F-65, won it. Oh, and by the way, they said that this camera's pioneering high-resolution sensor, and the work that it does is just unbelievable, that Hollywood said, this is an incredible camera. Well, the same one, they gave us another Oscar for another camera we build, which is called the Genesis. And you've heard of Panavision. Well, Panavision is the big top camera company for Hollywood, and we build a couple of cameras that they then use or sell, and they've been Panavized. This is called Genesis. A lot of movies are shot on this camera. We have a brand new camera called Venice, which has a 6K imager to make 4K images, but this camera just started shipping last week. It is unbelievable. It'll be used, you'll start seeing it on television shows and movies here very soon. That's a Super 35 sensor. It's very large. Remember we talked about 35 millimeter film is HD resolution. Well, this sensor actually is a grade above in that resolution, but that's how large the sensor is. It has anamorphic, which means it isn't resolution dependent or aspect ratio dependent. It's anamorphic. It can be a square image, wide, narrow, whatever the producer wants. I won't get into all that. Sports world. Sports is in 4K and has been now for a couple of years. This camera on the photo is the HTC 4300. And that camera, pardon me, has become the world standard for sports. So let's talk a little bit about it. At the Super Bowl, all the cameras were there. There were 73 of them, 77 total, but those were the cameras that shot the Super Bowl in 4K. There were many of them. I think of all the cameras, 12 of them were recording everything in 4K for the archive. This is just a view of the camera from Super Bowl a year ago, build up in its build-up kit. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate it. So this is what a high-level production system looks like. So we have a camera, the 4300, that's there on the pedestal. Below it on the right is a little box camera. Well, we build box cameras for all of our big cameras. Well, the only difference is the little one on the bottom doesn't have a viewfinder, it doesn't have RTS, and it doesn't have a lot to it. It's the imagers and a tally light, and that's about it. And that's what flies over the head for the cable cam. And that's what's sitting on the goalpost on a robotic head to look at where if the ball hits the goalpost, and they use them all over the stadium. We have this little Ptz camera. The bottom left here, we're showing it's a 4K Ptz camera. Top right's our switcher, the XVS line, XVS. It's 4K, IP, HD. It's my Paul switcher. It's all things to all people. Whatever you want it to do, it can do it. Then the bottom is a solid state video server that we build called a PWS. But this is kind of the complement today for HD and 4K use for production. The interesting thing about this is this camera is used for Fox football, and if you know, Fox transmits in 720. So they start off with this beautiful, huge image, squeezed down into a 720 image. But we love Fox if they're watching. So I have the first and only all 4K church in the world. I qualified by America because I don't have responsibility outside the U.S. It's Mosaic in Los Angeles. The pastor is Erwin McManus. Very forward-thinking pastor, great church. They are Hollywood's church, actually on Hollywood Boulevard. And when they contacted me, they said, look, we have a lot of Hollywood people in our church, and they keep telling us, well, you only got to talk to Sony if you're going to do this, because they don't want to be on the traditional terrestrial television stations or networks. They want to be over the top, which means over the top of the cable channels and the networks, and they're using the internet directly to the consumer. That's OTT. So they have the F55. They also have the 4300. They have our displays, of course, our switcher and our server. This is the workflow, and if you ever want to talk about it, there's actually a write-up on my website, but they are kind of the first, and they were not bleeding edge. They were just leading edge in this because everything they're doing, we were already doing for the networks or for television channels. But their thought process is, if we're going to, they have no IMAG, by the way, until now. Their thought was, if we're going to start off having IMAG and we're going to start off being a broadcast ministry, we're going to start at the right resolution and not try to build up to it, because I want it to be right from the beginning, and they have really been very successful with this, and it's led to other churches. I'm hoping that in April, the Sunday before the National Association of Broadcasters Convention in Las Vegas, NAB, we're going to announce 2 very large churches that'll be doing something similar to this for the right reasons. Lake Point Church in Rockwall, Texas, which is just east of Dallas. They have many of our little cameras, the little A7S and the FS7, our cinema cameras. Their FS5 and FS7 cameras are used 7 days a week. They shoot in the field during the week to record for the student ministry or for the pastor's going to do a little talk or announcements. Then they use them for IMAG support as well during on Sunday. They have the brand new camera, the FB75 or 80. It's the same camera with some upgrades in their chapel. They have an XVS switcher. They just went online right before Christmas. This is an example of the A7S and an FS7 of them shooting. They go all over the world. One of their big mission trips is they put in wells for water all over the world, and that's their kind of their focus is to put in water resources for people all over the world, and they take these cameras with them to document it. This is their control room in the XVS. It's a 5ME switcher sitting there. And by the way, these are volunteers running this equipment. These are not TDs that do the Super Bowl and then on Sundays fly to Rockwall, Texas to do church. But no, this is a fairly large switcher. Really quick on this. This is a great little story. So we own a little studio called Screen Gems. Screen Gems began many, many decades ago doing TV programs that were, I don't want to mention names for sure because I don't want to be wrong, but things like Green Acres and TV shows in the 70s were Screen Gems presentations. So Screen Gems is our budget studio, and they have to rent. So even though we own these studios, we don't give them cameras to use. They have to either buy it or rent it. So what they did, they went out and shot a motion picture that has been released, and it's been in theaters, shot on an A7S, our DSLR. So for a $3,000 camera, they shot Cadaver, which I've not seen, so that just kind of tells you what the movie's probably about. But it shows you that the quality of a DSLR that you can also buy at Best Buy, shot a major motion picture that was seen in theaters in the United States on giant screens. That's how great 4K is. And it's about the imager. You know, the camera is really good, but it's the imager that's taking that picture. So over the top today is Amazon Prime, of course, Netflix. YouTube has a 4K channel. So it's already happening. It's there today. This isn't in 5 years or 10 years. This is a today event. So the Great Commission, or which I call the Digital Great Commission. You all know what the Great Commission is, right? Okay. At the time when Jesus said that, the world that he was telling everybody to go into was very small. Well, today, people that sleep on rock floors have an iPhone or they have the internet. So that's how this Digital Commission is working. So traditional viewers, which I would be at my age, you're a millennial viewer, we have different viewing habits. I would rather watch TV on a giant TV screen where my daughter and my granddaughter and my children watch on their iPad or on a cell phone. The main thing that's happening right now is cord cutting. And some of you, I'm sure, have done this. You've gotten rid of cable, and you've decided, you know what, I'm just going to have an internet signal. I'm not going to pay $199 a month for DirecTV or Dish Network. And I'm going to watch free TV, and I'm going to watch things on an app for $4 a month from CBS or whatever it may be. Well, this is a big, big deal that's happening right now. The bandwidth going into homes is growing exponentially. And the price is going down because the cable companies that serve the internet are concerned about their business. So if you're going to cut the cable TV, they at least want you to continue to buy the broadband from them. The other thing is on demand. Everybody wants to see what they want to see, when they want to see it, on what device they want to see it on. They want to see it on a projector that's projecting a 110-inch size image, and the same show that when we watch on an iPhone. Cable has about 140 to 220 channels, but Roku has 2,000 channels. So that tells you, and about of that 2,000, there's about 150 churches that are on Roku. It's very low cost of entry for churches. You can go, and we've got two little handy cams on our table back there, a couple $1,000. You can start streaming on Facebook Live. You can start creating things for a Roku channel on your own website. CBS changed the game about a year and a half ago. They decided on their app, their $4 a month CBS All Access. They started creating original content. They had a big show called The Good Wife that ran on Sunday nights on the network. It ended, and they started producing The Good Fight, which was its sequel, and they put it only online. Then they moved Big Brother, which is a huge TV show for them in the summer, online for a second run of it, a second season of it, which all that did was drive people over to over the top. People are becoming very accustomed now to where TV happens when I want it to happen. It's not appointment television. I have to wait till Sunday night at 8 o'clock. I watch it on whatever device I want to watch it on. They're currently, which is hard to really tell, over 100 million subscribers of an over-the-top service. By 2019, 333 million subscribers of over-the-top globally. Sony provides a service that's over-the-top called PlayStation Vue. You can watch your TV through a PlayStation. There's 27 million PlayStation boxes connected to a network already sitting here in the United States. You can start watching TV for whatever it is, $50 a month with that. Netflix has 60 million registered users, Roku 10 million. Then for Netflix and Amazon, they require all the original content to be 4K, which has been good for us because we make the only 4K cameras. Anybody seen a little TV show created by Sony called The Crown on Netflix? That's my demo reel. When people ask me about, oh, well, what about this F-55? Go to Netflix. It's now just ended its second season. Spectacular. The show was created by Sony Pictures Television, shot by Left Bank Pictures, which is a studio of ours in the UK, shot on the F-55. Every image, when you watch that show and you just pause it, wherever it is in the scene, it's a piece of work. It's an artwork. The way the image is shot, lined up, it's gorgeous. Shot on that little camera, the F-55. I will tell you, once again, my 401k is grateful that Netflix for the first season gave us $130 million to create the first 10 episodes. So as you can see, we have a full lineup of 4K cameras. So 4K is today. That's the main thing. This is not in the future. There are other folks who say, well, you know, we're working on it. Well, it's already here. We don't build an HD TV. I believe now this new year, we're not going to build an HD Bravia. It's all going to be 4K with HDR. So let's review this. Why does my church need to shoot 4K? Well, we've talked about that. That's not decades away. It's not going to cost a fortune. Now, you can spend a fortune. I don't mind selling you a fortune worth, but you can buy a little $2,000 4K camera that does everything with streaming in there. Who can see it? A lot of people are seeing it today. All the people that are watching on Netflix that have a 4K TV, I believe Netflix has a $7 a month increase to see everything in 4K, which is really very, very small amount of money. We talked about UHD versus 4K, and a lot of times I hear this from churches, well, my church is barely high definition with our gear. Well, we and everybody else that's here can help you with that. Preserving the negative. Even though we have a pastor here, the message doesn't change, but how it's presented changes. The message is the message, has been for 2,300 years. The thing about it is, how do you effectively deliver the message today to a very changing consumer? And you need to take the part of the digital Great Commission is you take the message where people are. And they're on Netflix, they're on YouTube, they're wherever they are, they're watching something. And if you make compelling content, they'll see your content as well. Who can help us with this? Well, Mark and ABS can help you with that, number one. But that's the thing, is we are thrilled to do a demo for you. We'll bring gear in, we'll set it up, show you about it. When we put in switchers, I'm very proud of the fact that one of the trainers, and in fact at NAB, she'll be there, Lucinda, who's the technical director for Wheel of Fortune, a Sony show, does the training. So whenever you're trained on one of our switchers, we actually have real TDs that come in that do shows that 100 million people watch. They actually know what they're doing. They train your volunteers how to do it. We understand we do that over weekends as well. But it's really important that you find the right partner, because that's how we view this, as a partnership. One last thing I'll tell you, I didn't have a slide on this, was that, I don't remember when exactly, but middle of the summer last year at Prestonwood, we have a lot of baptisms every church service, and this man came out to be baptized. And one of the pastors that was doing baptism at the time says, church meet, I don't remember his name. He's from Tehran, Iraq. He's been watching Prestonwood online. He and his family have been saved. They've come to Jesus, watching Facebook Live at 3:15 in the morning. We didn't even know they were there. He and his family saved up the money so that this man could be baptized at his church in Plano, Texas. Now, one thing that I get to do sitting on the board of PowerPoint, we see a lot of emails and we talk to a lot of people who reach out to us. They heard Jack preach on the radio or on TV. These are the folks that we will not know about till we're in heaven. It's like Billy Graham this week passing away. Can you imagine the millions and hundreds of millions of people who are there because of him? Well, this is one of those things that when you meet someone from Iraq that watched you online, that when you're setting up the camera on Sunday morning and the volunteers haven't shown up and you're having trouble with that, there's a reason we do this. It's not about the fact it's fun to play with these great cameras or to be able to do this, but there's a eternal reason for that. So, real quickly, and I'm almost out of my time. You can choose us, you can choose anybody, but it's all very affordable now. The people who buy the very best, I'm going to go ahead and get through this is literally a commercial. The people who can buy anything, NBC, CBS, Fox, they choose us because they can afford anything. It's not about the price at that point. It's about the quality. And so one of the things that I would tell you, this is not something I've written, but this is a really good, this is kind of a statement of faith in a lot of ways. So read this. The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten. Now, editorial here, it kills me when I deal with churches that are spending money on gear or things that are not going to last. Precious money is where we get the tithe and offering. This is not, I used to be in a position of having a lot of capital money to play with, running all these TV stations. At my church, where I'm a tither and a giver, I want them to buy the best air conditioner. I want them to buy the best carpet. I want them to buy whatever it is, because that's really important. That's not our money. And so I think that's a big thing. Let me tell you who said this. You may have heard of this gentleman. Benjamin Franklin said that. He wasn't at First Baptist Church, Wichita Falls, Texas, and is unhappy about his last purchase. This is hundreds of years ago that this statement was made, but it's very true today. So when you make decisions about what you do with your church's money, it's really important that you make the right decision and you partner with the right, and I'm not saying we're the only right people or that ABS is the only right, because there are a lot of great people that take care of churches. But the main thing is you got to find someone that will partner with you, and that's everything from the actual technical hardware and the gear and the training and the service after the fact that you buy it. There's an 800 number of people that are committed to what you're doing. So anyway, this is how you can follow us if you're interested at all. It kind of varies whenever I have time to post things, but sometimes it's good stuff. But anyway, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you.